Welcome everyone to lesson number 7. Okay, CSS positioning, fun stuff today. This stuff is used to be one of the harder things to learn with CSS. Thanks to some new tools that are available now, which we're going to talk about today. It's becoming easier to do layout and positioning and things like that in CSS. It used to be extremely difficult to do a lot of this stuff, but well, it is not extremely difficult. It had a steeper learning curve, lots of little tricks you have to memorize, and had to get kind of hacky with it. But anyway, fun stuff. So I'm going to talk you through just kind of the evolution of how to get layouts and the way it used to be done and the way we're doing it now, and then also talk you through some different things that have to do with basically just layout, like how to position stuff on a page. That's one of the most important things that you do with CSS is building out the structure of the page. So not just like the colors and the the shape and the borders and all that, but actually like the layout of all different elements. That's a tricky thing to get down, and it's one of the first things you do when you're building a web page is getting the layout figured out. Okay. All right, people, let's see, for those of you that are curious about our full-time course, the the February class is full. If you are interested, we can put you on a wait list for it. Otherwise, we would love to have you come and sign up for our March course. And then happy to answer any questions that you have about that, Austin and I. Elizabeth is asking, Flexbox makes it easier? Yes, it's easier to get your layouts and stuff figured out with Flexbox. But let's all right, so if we go to Wikipedia, pull up some random article, and the way this reads and flows, it's kind of similar to a newspaper. It's back when web pages were first becoming a thing, when the internet was first coming about, a lot of the vocabulary and a lot of the styling and everything that came into play was heavily influenced by typography conventions that are used with, like things like newspapers or magazines, the typography layout, and so that's where a lot of these different words come from, like margin and padding and like a lot of these different things, come from the typography world. And so the layout, again, so initially a lot of the rules that governed how we would create layouts on pages originally were intended for, kind of mimicking, a printed, like a print, like kind of mimicking a newspaper. And so what happened is that as JavaScript became faster and more efficient, and as browsers became better, all of a sudden you had people that instead of trying to make a web page like this, they're trying to make something like Twitter, or they're trying to make something like Amazon, where it's most definitely not a newspaper. It's an interactive application, and taking the place of a desktop application. A long time ago, Amazon, like before the internet, Amazon would have had to have been a desktop application. I mean, the online shopping aspect aside, but that whole program and everything it's doing there, that would have had to exist on your computer as a desktop application. The trend now is that as browsers are improving and JavaScript's getting better, most of these programs are moving into the browser. So most of the stuff you do on your computer is through your internet browser. You'll have a couple dedicated desktop applications that you'll download, but you'll find that you're not downloading tons and tons of desktop applications anymore. It's the vast majority of the programs you're using are all in the browser, and so there's been kind of a transition. We need different rules, we need different tools to make these types of to make a desktop application in the browser instead of messing up a newspaper page to make it look and flow about to make it look and flow like a real application is supposed to look. So anyway, so we're going to talk through a lot of the different display properties and things that you can use to get layout. I mean, stuff like this image is here on the side instead of down below these two paragraphs. Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you make this image? Because as we learned yesterday, paragraph tags, and these are probably in paragraph tags, they clear the line. And so oops, did not click on that. They clear the line. So how do you get an image to sit next to it? Or this, we have this little bar over on the left. How do you do that? How do you create a bar that sits over here on the left, and then you have your content over on the right? Like, how do you get stuff to sit side by side? Stuff like that. So we're going to talk about that today. Talk about how to get layout figured out. And this can be one of the it used to be a much bigger headache than it is now. Thanks to Fluxbox and some of these other tools, it's a lot easier to get your layout figured out. But yeah, so CSS, that's another big aspect of CSS, is figuring out all this layout stuff. All right, so on JSBin, you can pull up HTML, CSS. It's pretty cool because your output just prints right out here on the right. This is a good little playground place to go through and work on stuff. So we're going to work through some different, some new CSS properties. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is display. So I'm going to create two divs here. And I'm just going to put styles on all divs. I'm going to give them a height of, actually, I'll give them a class. Top. So now in here, I did the period. Again, that's how we select for a class. And then let's give it a height of 50 pixels, a width of 50 pixels, and a color of blue. So now we see it appear. We have a blue box. Copy that down there. Change this to bottom. Okay, now let's give it a color of red. All right, and yeah, if we wanted them to be separate from each other, I could go margin top with 5 pixels. So I'll put 5 pixels of space in between them like that, but I'll just take it out. So, okay, so this right here, an element that clears out the space on the right. So if we look here, we have this blue box, but there's all this empty space sitting to the right of it. But that space is not being occupied. The red box jumps down onto the next line instead of sitting right next to the blue box. So instead of sitting side by side, it jumps down to the next line. And so it clears on the line. And this is called this is called display block. And some elements by default are display block. Some are display inline. And so these there's a few other kind of variations of it, but basically they fall into two general categories. We have block and then we have inline. Block is what a div is by default. A paragraph tag is a display block as well. A span will be display inline. So spans will all sit next to each other side by side by default. But you can go in and you can change them. So what we can do here is I can say display inline. You see it actually disappears, but if I put some content in it, and then let's come down here and content on this one, we see that they sit right next to each other. So their width So with display inline, it makes it so their dimensions automatically adjust to fit the size of the content. And then they sit side by side to each other. So they're, by default, they are block. They're display block. And I switch it back to block, and now you see that the blue squares, it's back to its original shape with this ugly text overflow. So then I switch to inline, and it jumps back to this one. So inline and block. There's also a style called inline block, where it allows you to still set height and width. So it kind of ignores the content, but what it does is it allows you to still set a width and a height. And so now essentially it makes it so it doesn't clear the line, and so the blue and the red box can now sit side by side. So display inline block. This can actually be a surprising headache when you're first getting into this, and maybe some of you felt that last night when you're playing around with stuff like how on earth do I get two things to sit side by side? This is one way to do it. Flexbox also lets us do it. Makes it a little easier. So display. There's some other properties here too that we can use for display. One value, we can do display none, and that totally removes it from the page. And so sometimes you'll go in and use JavaScript to dynamically set elements to like display none, or it's like a pop-up on the page. What will happen is the pop-up will be there on the page when it loads, but then it's probably just hidden, and then some JavaScript is going to go in and change it from display none to just display block or something like that, and then it will appear and we can see it. And so that's something that could be dynamically changed during runtime. So okay. Again, all this stuff, the notes from this lecture, they're all in the homework, so you can use that as a reference. Okay. So I'm not really going to demonstrate it as much, but there's another new CSS feature that's called grid. Allows you to use a grid system inside of your elements. That could be a good thing for you guys to look up. I'm not going to dive into that one as much right now, but we're going to flex is another display type. I'm going to come back to that. We're going to spend a lot more time on flex at the end of the lesson because that's one of the more practical pieces that we'll be spending more time with. But now we're going to come in and talk about position. Someone's asking about mini bootcamp, and AJ is right. Mid-February, date has not been confirmed yet. It is going to be 3 weeks long. We are, finalizing the exact date we want to do it. Ideally, well, we're deciding if we want to have a week of buffer after it for the start of the March course, or if we want the 3 weeks just to lead right up to the beginning of the course, just like this 2-week mini bootcamp is. So we time it to where if somebody were to come in and participate in the mini bootcamp, then they would be qualified and in a good position to be able to do our full-time course if they chose to do that. All right, let's go through and look at the position property now. Okay, so position, there's a couple of cool things we can do. So if we go to, let's see, actually I think our website might do this. So something I want to talk about. So see how this this header up here, this bar, it follows us around. What this is the element is set to position fixed. And so this is a fixed position, and what this does is it sets it so the element is relative to the viewport. The viewport is the dimensions of the browser. And so this ignores all the other content on the page, and it sticks to the top of the web page. So I'll need to set this so that way it's fixed. But then let's make this red one. I'll give it a height of 950 pixels. So now I can scroll, and then you can see it's kind of hard to tell, but as I scroll up and down, the blue square stays relative to the viewport here. And then the red one is really tall, so that makes it so we have to scroll, but the blue one stays fixed there. And so this is a common way to create like a header bar. So here I think I could do with 100%. And so this fills up the entire width. And then I can scroll up and down. And there's a little bit of a margin there at the top, which I think margin top 0. Nope. Maybe it's padding or something on the. Maybe I can't get rid of that, but just the way that the JS bin has it set. But anyway, so this makes it so the blue bar is relative to the viewport. Okay. All right. So common thing that you're doing. Okay. So the default position for all elements is static. So if you set something to position static, it's just redundant. So position static, there is no change in behavior when you set it to position static. So the only time you set it to position static is if you are wanting to make it back to the default and you're wanting to overwrite, another position that it's inheriting. Let's see. Maybe he's asking when is web development mini bootcamp. Yes, you are. This is the mini bootcamp right now that you guys are doing. So this is all the mini code bootcamp. Okay. All right. So we're gonna be doing it again. This is gonna be a recurring thing. So if you guys want to come back and refresh on some of this stuff or keep learning things, then it's something we're going to continue to offer as just a free service. Okay. All right. So we have static position. Static positioning. Another type of positioning is relative. And so a relatively positioned element, it's pretty much like it's positioned the same as if it were static. But then it makes it so we can use some other positioning methods on the elements. So it makes it so we can then use a couple new some other properties and things with it. So relative is the same positioning as static. There's just some new things that you can add to it. So and we'll get to that in a little moment. So let's say with this bottom one, let me make this back to a square. This one, I'm going to set its display position. I'm going to get rid of these displays and just leave them as their. So make them just their default block. And this one is position is going to be absolute. Okay. So an absolutely positioned element is an element that we can position relative to its parent. Okay, so we have this red box in the top left. So with position absolute, generally what we're doing is when we have an element inside of another one and we need to move it around, so let's say we want this red box to be more towards the middle, then what we're going to do is we're going to absolutely position it inside of its relatively positioned parent. So absolute, it's kind of like fixed position. So fixed position is to the viewport. So kind of like that header bar thing we were looking at on the Lambda School website. So absolute is kind of like that, but it's relative to its parent element. So the parent element will be the, as long as the parent isn't statically positioned. But it will be, we can position an absolutely positioned element relative to its first non-statically positioned parent. Very similar to how fixed position is relative to the viewport. So kind of crazy, and that was a big mouthful. Let's just couldn't help but laugh at myself as I was describing that. So let's go through and play around with this a little bit so we can kind of see how that works. So another property that opens up to us with absolute is if anything other than static. We can use some properties called top and left and right and bootcamp. sorry, bottom. I saw the Bootcamp comment in the Slack. Top, left, right, and bottom, and so we can move this element around. So what we're going to do, let's say, so we can say top 15 pixels. So it's going to move it 15 pixels down from the top. I could say left 15 pixels. It's going to move it over 15 pixels like that. Do 115 pixels like that, and then that's 115 pixels. Okay, so not quite centered, but it allows us to move it around and position it like that. Let me get rid of those. If I put a bottom, and then it pops up a little bit. Let me just stick another div here. So the bottom is not bottom of the page, it's the bottom of the element that it's nested inside of. So it treats this container as its frame. Yeah. Okay, so it positions that this is the frame. So it's like fixed, but the non-static parent is the frame instead of the viewport. Okay. All right. Okay, that's the main thing I wanted to cover there. And then let's see. Someone's asking about sticky versus fixed. Yeah, so a sticky element is treated as relatively positioned until its containing block crosses a specific threshold, at which point it is treated as fixed. So sticky, if you look here, there's a little example. Actually, I'll pull this over and show you the example. So a sticky element. So right here, this yellow box is stickily positioned, and what that means is that it's going to just stay in its normal spot, but then as soon as it hits a certain point, I gotta select it right here. There we go. But as soon as it hits a certain point, so you can see I scroll for a second and it just stays in a normal spot. But as soon as I scroll down 20 pixels, then it's going to stay fixed. So it's at 30. No, that's I said it. So 30. And now it goes a little bit more before it stays as fixed. If I did 45 or if I did 50, it might even go off the screen a little bit. No, I guess. Anyway. Oh, I get it. So it's going the other way. Okay. Yeah, so it's, okay. 0 pixels, then it's gonna wait till it gets to the very top before it sticks. So anyway, kind of cool. So this might be kind of small too, so you can check it out, but I'll post the URL so you guys can go in and look at that. All right, so let's get back to this. Now we're going to talk about Flexbox. Okay. All right, so with Flexbox, Fluxbox is a very simple way for us to start to position elements on a page. So in fact, all right, so here we have our top, bottom, and footer, and then I'm going to make a container. All right, actually, I'll get these all the same property attributes. Okay, so 50 pixels and 50 pixels. Color blue. Okay. So they have a little bit of margin on them, so that way they stick apart from each other. So, all right. So here we have these 3 boxes. So now we can do some cool stuff with the container to get some simple layouts. All right. So if we come in here, this is the complete guide to Flexbox. If you Google Flexbox, this is the first thing that shows up. This is also listed on the homework README at the bottom. If we come in here, all right, sorry, this is the, people are saying it's blurry. I'm looking at the, yeah, I'm wondering if it's just if the internet is kind of slowing down. It's looking clear to me, but maybe it fixed up right as I went to look at it. Let me know if you're continuing to have issues. Okay, so so inside of Flexbox, we can put properties on the containers and on the items that are in the containers. So properties on the children, properties on the parent. Everything that's in the left column here is stuff we put on the parent. Everything in the right side is stuff that we put on the children. So if we scroll down, we can set display to flex, and then by default, that's going to make stuff sit side by side. So I'm going to say display flex, and now they're sitting side by side, and I'm going to give them a margin right of 5 pixels. Okay. Now they're sitting side by side. So all I did was display flex, and now they all flow up and sit there side by side very nicely. There's some different things we can do. We can have them, actually let me go back and put some numbers in them. You can do like 1, 2, 3. So you see 1, 2, 3. Instantly, I can reverse their order by changing the flex direction. So I can do flex direction row reverse. So here I can do now we see they're coming off the right side, 1, 2, 3. If we come back in here, I can do a column reverse, and so or column. So column, now they're going down. This is how they were before, but then I can also do column reverse, so 1, 2, 3, so going up. So changing it between ascending and descending order. Okay, so this is something that if you're more experienced with CSS, this is kind of mind-blowing how easy it is to just instantly change that by just changing a single property. This is something that can be really tricky to, normally is pretty tricky to just like reverse at the drop of a hat. But yeah, you can determine how things wrap. If there's too many items on the list, or you can on a row, you can determine how it wraps if you want it to wrap, or if you want it to wrap reverse, so it would wrap around the other way, or tell it not to wrap. You can justify the content. So if we wanted these 3, so let's so flex direction, make this row, and then justify content center, and now we have 3 items in the very center, sitting side by side. It's pretty amazing that just with 3 quick little properties you can get in and get in and achieve that. This used to be, it used to be somewhat tricky to, or it used to be unintuitive, relatively unintuitive to figure out how to get that display stuff. So yeah, see our elements sitting side by side. Flexbox is not supported on older versions of Internet Explorer. So if you're trying to build an e-commerce site that's going to be marketing to a third world country or something, or or just places that are some places outside of or just like less modern countries will have more and more people using older operating systems. So specifically, if you're trying to support like web content that's being used in like in China or the Philippines, some places like that, you have to be more aware of browser compatibility issues. It's not as big of a deal now as it used to be, in part because Microsoft's new Edge browser has finally turned a corner, and it updates in a way that is consistent with Chrome and Firefox and Safari. So that way you don't have all these people stuck with older versions of browsers that can't support new web technologies. That was one of the big problems with Internet Explorer. So Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge are different. And Internet Explorer used to cause a lot of problems because it was it still causes problems for people that have older computers and are using it because it doesn't, depending on the version of Internet Explorer, they will not be, it won't support newer JavaScript features or newer CSS or HTML features, and so it makes it so when you're writing your code base, you have to go. You used to, really have to pay attention to this, or you'd have to go in and check and make sure your stuff looks good on, 4 different versions of Windows and Chrome and and Firefox and Safari, and you'd have to make sure your website looks good on all these things. I had a teacher before, I used to do a lot of freelancing work, and he used to call it Internet Exploder because you would have your webpage that would look really nice on Chrome and Safari, and then you'd go in and pull it up on an older version of Internet Explorer, and the layout and everything would like be all messed up because one of the things you used isn't supported in the older versions of Internet Explorer. So Flexbox is a relatively newer thing that works on all newer browsers, but that's something that you want to check, and just depending on what you're trying to do. So there may be instances where you can't use Flexbox, but going forward, that will become less and less of a problem because the new Edge browser that Microsoft uses on its operating system handles updating and everything more gracefully. All right, looks like we're having a rough night for streaming. I guess it might be my upload. That's probably yeah. That might be my issue. I guess if I manually shift it to 720p, then it clears up. I have pulled up the stream on mine too. So okay. All right, justify content, align items, flex direction, align cell. Yeah, and most of a lot of the main things that you're doing are generally on the container. So for align items, so for like items inside of the container. So let me give the container a background color so we can see it. Now, let me a little smaller. So 200 pixels. So now let's say we want those blue boxes to be in the middle. We can do align items. You can see flex start, flex end, center, stretch. So I'll say center. So they are centered perfectly inside of the green box. Okay, and there's some other properties you can put on specifically on the child. I find that the majority of the time, the stuff I want to do is just on the container. Like this right here is, doing 90% of the stuff that I generally need to do as far as like Fluxbox is concerned. And Yeah, so you'll probably find that as well, that you can get a lot of the basic stuff you want to achieve. You can just do that here on the container. So fun stuff. Use Flexbox. Get to know it. It will make things a lot easier for you. Okay. All right. So this is actually it for today. So this lesson is a little bit shorter, a little bit lighter. The positioning stuff we're able to get through a little bit faster. Next month, we're going to change the balance of the lessons a little bit, just because some of those JavaScript ones are a little intense and covered a little too much material. But then, some of these CSS ones are maybe a little bit lighter. So, okay, so the main thing, again, Flexbox is one of the main things that you're going to be using for your assignment today. But just, getting used to the position. So let me... So again, we had position, display, and then specifically flex, which is a type of display. So these are some of the main things that we covered today. Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry about the connection issues, everyone. That makes it kind of frustrating tonight. We'll work on that and make sure that we'll have a clearer connection for tomorrow. Yeah, usually we don't get these issues when we're using Zoom. We use Zoom for all of our videos in class. And we usually only use the YouTube live streams when we're having larger presentations with like maybe the whole school or with or in kind of a free environment like this. But yeah, Fluxbox Froggy, that's a super fun game. That's a great tutorial to get in and learn about Fluxbox. That's something that a lot of our students will do that. Actually, I think, was that on the homework? Yeah, oh, that's in there. Yep. Yeah. Great. Okay, well, let us know if you have any questions, and thanks, everyone. And I will see you guys tomorrow for the last day, where we're going to talk about how to wire in JavaScript and use JavaScript to change a lot of this stuff dynamically. So like click on a button and change the color of something or things like that. Okay. Let's see. AV's asking real quick, how do you commit multiple files at once in a terminal? So you have to do that in the add stage. So we'll type in git add -- all, and that will select all the files inside of your repo. Used OBS for streaming. Yeah, so we've used OBS before. With these scheduled events, the default thing is to use Hangouts on Air. But yeah, that's OBS is the other one that we're using. Yeah, maybe we'll have to try that tomorrow night. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. And I'll be watching the channel for a while and answering questions. If you have any questions about our full-time course, feel free to reach out to me or Austin, or ask it, somewhere on Slack. Our class begins next week for February. It'll be a lot of fun. We've had a bunch of people from this class sign up. I'm so excited to have you guys in there. Yeah, it's a 26 weeks long, full time. Cover a lot of good JavaScript and computer science and full stack web development and backend stuff, databases, authentication, security. Anyway, lots of fun stuff. All right, talk to you guys later. Have a good night.